Hey everyone, it's Kevin, and in today's video, I'm going to tell you how to overcome bulimia and binge eating without restricting and without gaining weight. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so you never miss a video, and if you want to speak with me one-on-one, there is a link in the description box. How do you stop bulimia or binge eating without restricting and without gaining weight? Good question, and this is a common fear that a lot of people have. They think that once they stop the compensatory measures, once they stop all the exercise, once they stop purging, that they're automatically going to gain weight. If they listen to their hunger or if they eat intuitively, then they're going to gain weight. Well, this is not true. There are ways to recover from this without the unwanted weight gain. I will say this at first, you should be more focused on stopping the bad behavior than on the weight gain. I'm not saying that it's not important, it is, but for right now, really focus on stopping the destructive habits, and then you can focus on the weight. My first point is focus on behavior, not the weight. I know you want to lose weight. I know you're afraid that you will gain weight and you'll be fat. Okay. But if you're binge eating or if you're purging, you have bulimia, you need to stop that first. That's what's really damaging you. That's damaging you a lot more than the weight gain that you'll have after you start listening to your hunger and after you stop the compensatory measures. If you're binge eating, you're probably already gaining weight. So it's not like if you stop that and you stop the fasting or the purging, that then you're going to gain a lot more weight. Well, the fact is you're probably gaining weight now. It's way more important to end these kind of behaviors, to focus on these behaviors, stop them, and then focus on the weight loss. Don't do two things at the same time, then you don't accomplish either goal. The obsession with weight, I think, is a big problem with people trying to recover from this. They're so obsessed and fixated on the number on the scale that it distracts them from what the real problem is. I recovered from my eating disorders when I realized what the problem was. The problem was the eating disorder. The problem wasn't the weight. I was chasing the weight. I was trying to correct the weight without correcting the behavior. My advice to you, really focus on the behavior. And when you do that, when you start emphasizing healthy behavior, the weight will correct itself. My next point is if you binge, don't purge, and don't compensate. Easier said than done. But the thing is, the compensatory behaviors are actually contributing to the binge. It's a reinforcing cycle. Here's how it works. So you binge, and then you realize that you need to do something about it. So you either purge, but if you can't purge, then you exercise, or you fast the next day, or you swallow a bottle of laxatives, or whatever. You'll find a way. But when you do that, you're giving yourself an escape. Okay, get rid of those escapes, whether it's excessive exercise or it's purging. Because in the back of your mind, when you binge, you're thinking, well, I'll just purge. Or I'll just exercise. Or I just won't eat for a couple of days and that'll take care of it. Get rid of that. Once you get rid of that compensatory behavior and you realize that there's no way to compensate for all those excess calories, you're a lot more motivated to not do it. It might not happen the first 2 or 3 times, but really you've got it in this cycle somewhere. And the best way to end it, as I pointed out in a previous video, is before the binge. But okay, I get it. Those urges are really powerful sometimes, and it doesn't always feel like you have control. But after the binge, that's your second chance to end the cycle. Accept the extra calories just for a few times. It's okay. Trust me, in the long run, ending the cycle will help you so much more. Don't focus on the here and now. Focus on the long term. I do want to address weight. Weight is important to a lot of people, especially if you're in a sport or if you have some sort of activity that is weight dependent. I mean, a lot of things are weight dependent, but if you like dancing or cycling or you like hiking, or you just want to play with the kids, if you're really overweight, it's hard to live that life. It's hard to do the things that you want to do. So here's what I would say. Don't step on the scale more than twice a week. Twice a week, that's every 3 or 4 days. That kind of gives you a good gauge of what you're doing, whether you're gaining, whether you're losing. So when you're stepping on it like 2-3 times in a day, or every day, I used to step on it every day. I didn't feel like it helped because then I would freak out if there was some fluctuation, and I just think it causes too much mental distress. What I like to do is eat light one day or have a really early dinner and then weigh myself the next day. That gives my That gives my body time to process all the food, or maybe I'll just have some like liquids in the evening. That way I don't have a lot of solid food in my system. But I don't agree with people who say they should ditch the scale. I don't buy that. I think a scale is a useful tool if you use it right. So stepping on the scale a couple times a week, it's right there. It's in the bathroom. And if you don't have one, you can get a good one for $30 or $40. It's useful. Use it. It's right there. It's digital. You don't have to play with the little, the weights like you used to back in the day. I think keeping your finger on the pulse, taking measurements, daily, monthly measurements. It's a good way to keep yourself in check. I think the reason why people end up overweight, and whether they have an eating disorder or not, is because they don't take measurements. They don't keep track of things. Stepping on the scale a couple times a week, that still gives you an idea of whether you're going in the right way or the wrong way. And if you're bulimic or if you're a binge eater, you really like to know what your weight is. Yeah, I mean, so I'm not going to say ditch the scale altogether. That's too much sometimes psychologically. So twice a week, no more. My next tip for you is avoid anything that's diet or low sugar or low something. What I mean is just eat regular whole foods. Eat regular flavors. Don't eat anything that has the word light, low, diet, or reduced. They usually don't taste very good. You're not going to be satisfied. And my problem with that is you give yourself license to eat more than what you want. Just eat the regular stuff. You're going to like it more. You're actually going to feel more satisfied. And you know that it's going to have the normal amount of fat, salt, and sugar. So in theory, at least, you're going to be more compelled to moderate your portions. But even if you don't, at least you're going to be more satisfied, and it's going to have fewer ingredients. A lot of these other foods that have the word like diet and reduced, they just replace the good ingredients with really bad ingredients. Either eat what you want or just don't eat it at all. My other problem with these foods is that it's really common among people with eating disorders or disordered eaters, not technically people with bulimia or binge eating, but they're always buying like the fake stuff. They're never buying the real stuff. They're always buying these really manufactured foods because they don't trust themselves with real food. Learn to trust yourself with real food. You're on your way to becoming a normal eater. I also don't recommend that you cut out food groups yet. It's really common among people with eating disorders to identify a food group or an ingredient and then cut it out. I don't recommend that you do that because what happens is you start to identify one food group as the problem. I used to do this all the time. I used to say, oh, sugar is the problem, grains are the problem, dairy is the problem. None of those were the problem. I was the problem, okay? It was me choosing to make bad decisions. And that's how you have to see it. No one food is the problem. So keep everything on the table for now. If you feel like something isn't helping you, or you feel like there's some food group that you want to eliminate, let's just say you don't do well with dairy, or you don't do well with high fat foods. Like for me, I do well on a lower fat diet. That's just me, okay? That's okay. But for now, make sure you give yourself permission to eat anything and everything. Yes, even the processed food. And this leads me to my next point. Don't call foods good or bad. Okay? And try to get rid of the labels junk food. There's no such thing as a bad food or a good food. We give these foods adjectives when we really shouldn't. They're not good or bad. There are foods that you should eat more of, and there are foods that you should eat less of. You should eat more carrots, and you should eat fewer Oreos. Every food has a place. Okay, I still indulge once in a while. I just don't eat it a lot. Okay, I don't sit there and eat an entire carton of ice cream at night. In fact, I can't remember the last time I had ice cream, so maybe that's not the best example. But what I'm saying is I always give myself permission to eat something, and I always want to have it available. And I think this is really important. It's just having that normal relationship with food and being comfortable with it. That's a key. Now, I'm not saying you have to eat junk food to be recovered. That is not true. The definition of recovery is you eat right anytime, anywhere. You feed your body right anytime, anywhere. Okay? You're not always obsessing about what you eat. That to me is a good standard definition of recovery. Now, we could kind of argue about what is really recovery, and it's not really defined, but that's a good starting point. And I think giving yourself permission to eat all the food groups and any of the processed foods out there is good. Don't say this is good and this is bad. Okay, we're not talking about angels and demons here. We're just talking about food. This is chemical. That's all it is. They're just concoctions of different atoms. Okay, that's it. So don't pretend like some food is your enemy. Okay, there is no enemy. You're just making bad choices. Another thing you need to understand in recovery is the law of caloric density. So what does that mean? It means how many calories are there in 100 grams. So if you took 100 grams of any one food, they're all going to have different amounts of calories. If you took 100 grams of broccoli, it would only have 20 calories or something. If you took 100 grams of cheese, it would have 600. So that, and then there's everything in between. A piece of bread would, 100 grams of bread would have something like 300. You get the point. So on the low end of the scale, you have the fruits and the vegetables, and that's basically it at the low end. And then you have the grains, and then you progress to processed foods, and then you have stuff like cereals, and then you have nuts, and then you have cheese and oil at the far end. So what helped me in my recovery was staying on the low end and staying away from the high end. If you like cheese and you like high-fat foods, I'm not saying you should never have them, but just keep in mind it's really easy to overdo it. And when you're in recovery and you're used to eating large volumes, probably safer to stay on the low end, because you can still have a large volume of food without blowing your budget for the day. Personally, I do better on a low-fat diet. It's easier for me to lose the weight if I need to, and it's easier for me to maintain it, because most of the things that I eat are very low in density. So understand that law of caloric density. If it doesn't really make sense, just use a nutrition database. I like Self Magazine's nutrition database, and you can set it for 100 grams. Type in any food, literally any food, and it'll show you the amount of calories in 100 grams. This is why I think nutrition labels suck, at least in the United States, because it says suggested serving size. Well, that could be anything. For example, if you look at a bag of potato chips, it says 28 grams. 28 grams, it's like the palm of your hand. It's nothing. But that has 150 calories. So that means that it has 5 calories per gram. That's really high. That's why it's really easy to overeat potato chips. Whereas if you eat baby carrots and you weighed 100 grams, they would only have something like 40 calories. So that's a massive difference. You can eat a large volume of the carrots and not worry about it, but then the potato chips, really easy to overdo it. My next tip for you is to put some foods on hold for now. I guess this sounds like I'm contradicting myself, because you should give yourself permission to eat anything. But I think early in your recovery, it does make sense to avoid certain foods altogether, kind of like they're drugs. So the difficulty with eating disorders is that you have to eat. I mean, you can go 20 or 30 days without eating, but then nasty things start to happen. If you've ever read about starvation, it's nasty. Okay, you don't want to go that route, especially voluntarily. So that's not really an option. But what you can do is sustain yourself on lower calorie foods that are less rewarding, less stimulating. Apples aren't trigger foods for anybody. Okay, nobody eats an apple and says, "Oh, that triggered me." Okay, it's always something like ice cream or peanut butter or cookies or something like that. When you're in that early stage of recovery, I highly recommend you just avoid them for now. It's just not worth it. I remember early on in my recovery, I thought I was totally recovered, and so I bought anything and everything. And then the next thing I know, I ate like $40 worth of food. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm not really recovered. Don't play with biology is my point. Biology is a really tricky thing. Your brain is tricky. So for right now, the really palatable stuff, for some of you, that could be cheese, ice cream, whatever. Everybody has different tastes. Just remove those for now, okay? Learn to eat the low density stuff in reasonable quantities, and then progress. It's like a video game. Start at level 1, and then you go to the last level. My next tip is start to trust your hunger. How many times have you eaten without hunger? A lot of times. Okay? If you're not eating out of hunger, you're eating emotionally, or just mindlessly, because you don't really need it. right? So this is one reason why I recommend delaying breakfast a little bit, because if you wait 2 or 3 hours to have breakfast, let's say 10 a.m., 11 a.m., 12 a.m., 12 p.m., you're actually going to be hungry at that point. So the more times you can wait to be hungry before you eat, the better. I mean, that's what normal eating is, right? You eat because you're hungry, and it's time to feed yourself. Voila. Why is it so hard? But at least once a day, eat because you're actually hungry. And you'd be shocked how many times you eat without primordial hunger. Okay, maybe we're just trying to distract ourselves. Maybe we have some emotion. Like right now, there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of fear. I bet there's a lot of emotional eating going on right now. But there are so many bad reasons why we eat. Really start to minimize those. The only reason why you should eat, 90% of the time at least, is because you're genuinely hungry. And just ask yourself this the next time you eat: am I really hungry right now, or can I forgo this? Do I really need this right now? You'd be shocked how much less you eat when you actually ask that question. My last tip for you is this: if you do gain a little bit of weight, don't freak out. The worst thing you could do is to go back to your old ways, to go back to purging, to go back to the exercising, to go back to the binge fast cycle. Don't do that. You can always lose weight. It's not like if you gain weight once, then you can never lose it. That's not how the body works. The body is constantly in flux. It's constantly utilizing fat, gaining fat. Your body is this really dynamic machine. You can lose the weight, okay? It's actually not that hard. You just have to be consistent, and you have to think long term. If you can do those two things, you're good to go. And if you start listening to your hunger a lot more, it's not going to be hard at all. I think weight loss has become way too complicated. I think it's really simple. It doesn't need to be hard. It doesn't need to be slow torture. I don't know why we ever thought of it that way. I think the problem is that we want to get the results today. We don't want to think long term. We hear these stories where people lose 30 pounds in a month. It's like, oh, I want that. You don't do it like that. Think long term, lose weight over time, be consistent. It's not that hard. I hope you found this video educational and entertaining. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and if you want to speak with me, there is a link below. If you liked this video, I'm sure you'll like one of the other videos that you see on the screen. Click one of them, and I'll see you there. Finally, I want to thank you for joining this program. You could be doing anything else in the world right now. You could have spent that money on anything else, but you chose it to spend it on this. Because you value your health and you see me as a potential solution to your problems. So thank you for being here. It's an honor every time somebody joins. I value every member.